Hello everybody and welcome back into Cult Film Cafe with me, one of your hosts, Jonathan, and I'm joined as always with my partner in crime, Kenzie McLean.
Hello there.
And the guest on this week's pod, a bit like a couple episodes ago, it's a family connection. I have my big sister, Lorna Walker.
Hi.
So, if you aren't familiar with the podcast, I'll just give you a quick rundown. We are a cult movies podcast and we are exploring 100 must-see cult movies poster. And on every episode, we explore one of the films on the poster from different aspects, which will become apparent later on in the podcast. Now, also, what we do here at the podcast is we let the guests decide what film they want to talk about, just so that they can pick what they want to talk about, and so it's not a big sort of commitment or they're a bit nervous about it. So I'm just going to hand you over to Lorna and she's going to let you know what film we're going to be talking about this week.
This week we're going to be talking about The Breakfast Club.
It is now 7:06. You have exactly 8 hours and 54 minutes to ponder the error of your ways. Any questions?
Yeah. Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
A brain, a beauty, a jock, a rebel, and a recluse.
Can't believe this is really happening to me.
Before this day is over, they'll break the rules.
Chicks cannot hold their smoke. That's what it is.
Bare their souls.
I'm a nymphomaniac.
Are your parents aware of this?
Take some chances.
Being bad feels pretty good, huh?
And touch each other in a way they never dreamed possible.
Why'd you do that?
Because I knew you wouldn't.
The Breakfast Club. They only met once,
I don't want to be alone anymore.
You don't have to be.
but it changed their lives forever.
I mean, I consider you guys my friends. I'm not wrong, am I?
Universal Pictures presents Emilio Estevez, Paul Gleason, Anthony Michael Hall, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, and Ali Sheedy in a John Hughes film.
Why are you being so nice to me? Because you're letting me.
The Breakfast Club.
Right, so just first question that we always ask on the podcast is, why did you pick that off the list?
It's one of my favourite films. I remember the first time watching it when I was a teenager, just really enjoying it. It's one of the films that you feel as if you could be in the film and be one of the characters.
Oh, that's totally true. I mean, I haven't watched it myself over the last couple of days. I totally agree with that. I know that you've revisited it recently as well. How do you think it stands up today?
Good. I still really enjoyed the film.
So, Kenzie, what about yourself? You're fresh to the film, I assume, like most of these films you're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing is I know most of these films, just never actually watched them. So yeah, this is my first watch for me. And I'm not usually into these type of films that much. I'm not really bothered about them, but I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed this film. I really liked it a lot. I thought it was quite funny. I think it's super solid. It's like really good. Like I heard it was meant to be good, but like I was quite surprised about how good it was. I had a very good time with this film. I didn't really know too much about it either. So yeah, it was really good. Like so many different things about it. It was funny. It was quite emotional at parts as well, and it just for the type of film it was, it's kind of the best of its kind. I feel like it was really good.
Yeah, I think it's one of those films, and for this podcast, like something I try and find out is there extended versions, director's cut. I'm always looking to see if the film has an extended version or if this is the only cut that was made. And as far as I can make out, that well, just to let everybody know, this film was originally meant to be 2.5 hours long.
Really?
Yeah, that's what John Hughes imagined it being. But obviously, in the 80s, films of that length really weren't a thing, and he cut it down to, I think it's 97 minutes.
It's 97 minutes, yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there that say that this film's almost perfect in that sense, that it's not lacking anything. It's not like you can clearly see that something's been removed or it would get better if something's added in. And even to this day, there's never been an actual full director's cut released, even though it's well known that the film was originally conceived as a 2.5 hour movie. The closest thing you can get to it is there was a release of the DVD a few years ago which put in about 50 minutes of deleted scenes, but they are really raw. They're not edited as like super raw. So that was never ever going to come out. It's not like they could have just added those scenes to what's already out there and made a director's cut or an extended version, because what we see is super polished and what is in the extras isn't, as like super raw, like 1 or 2 takes. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I really feel like the film's like the right length. I mean, maybe it's a good thing it didn't get to be, or who knows. I just feel like it never really loses its like you're kind of captivated in the film for the whole time, and it kind of ends. It just felt like it was the right kind of hour and a half. I feel like that was right for it.
It's all about characters as well, and if people listening aren't familiar with the film, go and check it out. It's free on Amazon Prime. It's on that Freevee. Is that what it's called?
Freevee, yeah.
Yeah, you can watch it with ads. The Amazon Prime's got this thing where you can watch some stuff with ads now, which I think is quite a good thing to let people that maybe don't have the money to subscribe to these things check things out. And for those of you who aren't also familiar with what the film is about, it's basically a film about 5 high school kids that are in detention on a Saturday. That's essentially the premise of the film. That sounds super boring. However, it's really, really not, because in that 90-minute movie, you get real solid characters that they explore their backgrounds, and that's basically what makes this film so good and so relatable with people, is it looks at people from different peer groups and basically psychoanalyzes them and makes them break down, and they have these kind of existential conversations with each other about how they maybe came to be those people.
Yeah, and like I'm saying, I think everybody's going to relate to one of the characters, if not more than one. I know that like high school is tough, and it's not always easy to talk to people outside your what you're expected of your social group. I think that's what I quite enjoyed about it.
Yeah, I think all the characters are written really well, and I like all the characters in the film. They're all very different from each other and have like so many different things that all starts coming out as the film goes on. And I think that's hard to do. Like, I don't think a lot of films pull that off. I usually, with films like these, there's like, there's some that are quite good, and there's like some that are not that. But no, I think every character is as strong as the other.
Yeah, this film is it's purely as good as it is based on the strengths of the characters within the movie. Because, like we said, the premise of the film, there's not really much going on. It's learning about these characters' story arc and how their home life is, how life's like, even to why they're at detention. Because you've got some characters there that you wouldn't assume would be doing anything bad to get detention. You know, look at Brian the Brain, or I don't know what he's sort of quoted as these days. There's been different variations of what they're called. It's like the athlete, the princess, the basket case, I mean, the rebel, I don't know what you would call him, the criminal, and the brain, or the mathlete, or the nerd, him. But he doesn't strike me. And Claire, the princess, played by Molly Ringwald, obviously Brian's played by Anthony Michael Hall. Those, if you just looked at them without them speaking and just looked in on them as a visual, they're the two, and the jock, I suppose, Emilio Estevez, the athlete. Those three look like they probably shouldn't get detention. Yeah,
it's like a bunch of like people who would never interact with each other outside of this situation, but because this situation's happened, they now do. They even bring it up in the film, like, oh, after this, what happens after, which I think is a really cool thing as well. Will everything just go back to the way it was, or will they stay like friends and stuff like that? Yeah, the film does kind of go deep with each of the characters. You know, of course, I think you figure out why pretty much. Do you figure out why all of them are there?
Yeah.
I don't remember why was Claire there. I completely forgot.
Why was Claire there?
I don't think they say about Claire. I know why every single other person was there, but I don't know about.
I think she was there for skipping school and going shopping. I think that got brought into it quite early. She didn't say it at the bit when everyone else was talking, but I think that got mentioned when she was in the car with her dad at the beginning.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, because I was so confused. I was like waiting for Claire's part. I was like, wait, what did she do? But alright, that would make sense, yeah. But it pretty much kind of goes around them at the.
Yeah.
And it's quite emotional as well. Like when the athlete guy starts talking about like why he was there, that hit me. Like that hit me really hard. I thought that hit like, bro, I was tearing up a little bit. That was so good.
I found the same. I was like, because everybody, I think, obviously can relate to if you've been bullied at school or felt like, and he's feeling that shame about actually he's bullied. He's done that to somebody.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was like, for me, that was the highlight. That one part, like it was just the emotion I felt for like him in that scene. It was done so well. Like that was right. That one really hit me. Like, wow, I wasn't expecting that from this film. Well, so that was a kind of interesting thing.
It's the other one, Alison.
Mm-hmm.
She's a bit weird because I'm not sure. Yeah, it's 100% find out because she's a compulsive liar and she tells lies. So she's the kind of weird one where you don't believe anything that she says for the whole film, and you really don't. So I'm not really sure why she's there, but that's probably why she's there, because she is a compulsive liar and she lies about everything. So it's probably affected her in school in some way.
I think, does she not just say, I think she says something like, oh, she just went there just because she had nothing better to do.
Yeah, but
that could be
that
lies.
could be her lying, yeah. She's just... Bender's a weird one. Is he just there because he just is always in detention?
I'm guessing he's always there. It seems like that, yeah.
Because at the start of the film, it's like, just because you're here all the time doesn't give you the right to act like an asshole or something, is what Andrew says to him. Because they're obviously not normally there. I'm guessing you were touching on why Brian was there. Is that what you were having the conversation about? No, it was Andrew.
Andrew.
Were you talking about Brian or Andrew, why he was in detention?
I was talking about the athlete guy.
Andrew.
I can't feel sorry for him because of what he done to somebody else.
No, I'm not saying I do, but I think like he done it for a reason. He feels deep shame, and it's quite sad because Brian does know this person that he's done that horrible thing to, and you can see them all getting upset.
But if you look at the reason Brian's there,
Oh, that completely caught me off guard. That one, I was like, wait, where? I was like,
that's the big issue.
I was like, where is that going? And then
he's the quintessential, the guy you pick on in high school because he is super clever and super brainy, and he's in. And it was when they were talking about the clubs. Oh, so you're in these clubs, and Claire's like, oh, they don't matter because they're like clubs for subjects. So it's like he's in the maths club, he's in the physics club, and that. And what do you do in these clubs? Oh, we talk about the subject. And to her, that doesn't matter because it's all about social stands, the social hierarchy for her, when in reality for Brian it's all about academic clubs. It's all about academia for him. And the problem with him is he's a quintessential person that Andrew would pick on.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he's in the Breakfast Club is because they found a flare gun. It's like he was going to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you give somebody detention because they're having that hard a time? I get that he's done something wrong and he took a flare gun to school.
They won't see it as he was going to kill him, so I think they just saw you brought a flare gun to school that went off in his locker.
Yeah,
which you're not allowed to do. They obviously wouldn't have known that he was...
doesn't ever look at it. I mean, he's just...
But I think back in that time when the film was made, mental health issues weren't as talked about. So nobody would have known that he was feeling so... And there wasn't the help either, like school...
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. As somebody who is a long-term mental health sufferer myself, I totally agree with that. And I'm a chunk younger than the characters in this. And even for me, going through high school was difficult, especially when I became sort of 15, 16, and there wasn't really the help that's probably available now to you at such a young age. I don't know about you, Kenzie. You're obviously a chunk younger than me. And has school kind of moved on with that? Is there support for sort of people?
It's a lot better than it was, but yeah, I feel like I feel mental health is still like a thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. I feel like a lot of people deal with it still on their own, which is quite bad. But like, it has progressed, but I guess I would still say it's not quite there yet. But I think it's getting there, and I think like schools and stuff like that are trying a lot harder to help students. But it's the thing of getting students to like talk about it. I think is the hardest thing.
Oh, that's 100% true. I mean, you can only get help if you ask for help. Like, if you're willing to open up, at least in some level. That's always the difficult part. But yeah, this is why this film stands up today, because it talks about so many things that most people have went through. Now, and because they've done it, when John Hughes was writing this, he'd done it really well to pick so opposite peer groups that there would be at least one that you could zone into.
Yeah, I think school hierarchies are really like scary. Like, I mean, I was never popular at school, but I could totally see like how people who were
They're not
like
popular now either. So
I know, but it's like
that's a lie. Everybody, he's a friend of mine, obviously, but
aye, so it's like I could see that being really pressurizing and stuff like that. And yeah, if you're in it, you don't really want to be out of it because you can. It's weird because different people will look at it differently. For people who weren't very popular, they probably won't think much of it. But for people who were, they'll see it completely different, which I totally get. And you don't really want to like. Schools are weird, man. Like I did not have a great time in school. I don't know about any views, but I didn't and stuff like that. So it's like it's a weird place, with like a kind of weird kind of how everything works.
Well,
Like,
we're brother and sister. We
Had completely different experiences.
We're completely different people, as much as we're best friends. But yeah, I mean, I can vaguely remember now, looking back at your high school experience and just how it was difficult for you for a multitude of reasons that were different to what made high school difficult for me.
I think everyone gets a kind of unique experience in a way. Although there's things people can relate to, like certain things, but I think everyone's individual experience is very different.
Well,
Yeah.
there was one similarity with us. We both moved at the exact wrong time because we were kind of just at that stage of high school where you were just about to go into high school or just started high school. I was just about to go into high school and moved to a completely different place. And that's kind of daunting when you leave a group of friends that you've had for 7-8 years.
Yeah.
I find it hard enough making friends,
Aye.
so actually having to make new friends when you're in second year of high school was
must be
probably one
rough.
of the scariest things that I've ever had to.
Aye,
to
it is tough. Like I'm the same. I mean, I don't wish it on people, but there's people that take to it more than others. And I mean, think about how hard it was to make friends as a kid. It's tenfold harder as an adult to make friends. I know that from personal experience.
Yeah. And I think you just get put in a group, especially in high school, where you're either more so part of the popular crowd or the not so popular crowd that but you've always got that worry when you're kind of on the borderline, which was a bit myself, that you don't want people to notice you just in case you're a target, which never was the case. I sailed through quite
Oh, you were one of the popular kids at high school.
I don't know where you get that from.
Compared to me, you definitely were. You hung about with all the quote unquote cool kids.
Later on when I left.
No, but that's one of the massive pluses towards this film is we're just sitting, and it sounds like we're not talking about a film in a film podcast, but we are. It's so relatable to personal experience, and that's why even in 2022, it's a great film to revisit. There's some characters alone make this movie. Also, there's some other cool sort of facts about it. The high school that you see in this film and Ferris Bueller's is the same high school.
Is it?
He was filming the films at the same time. I know Ferris Bueller came out a few years later, but to save money, they were filming them simultaneously. The library in the high school wasn't big enough, so they built a library set in the gymnasium. So that's what you see. That's how it's so big, because it's in the gym hall, but it looks like a library. John Hughes wrote the script in 2 days in 1984, 82, 84, somewhere in that kind of time frame, which is incredible when you think about it. He wrote an amazing film in 2 days. It takes me weeks to come up with an idea to write something.
I wrote a short film script. It's not even probably only 10 minutes. That took me ages.
Yeah,
How do you write something so quick?
Well, because he was known as a screenwriter, John Hughes, so he wasn't meant. Whoever was funding this film didn't want him to direct it at all. So he'd wrote the screenplay and they were looking for people to direct it, but he convinced them. And I'm glad he did, because it's his sort of... As much as John Hughes is a famous name in the film industry, he's more known for producer and screenwriting credits, because I think he's only directed maybe 9 films or something. But he's been involved in a lot more. Like, he wrote Home Alone, stuff like that, but never made it.
Right.
Aye, so he's bigger. Like, he's got 53 writing credits on IMDb, but he's got 8 director credits. But yeah, some great positives for The Breakfast Club. Has anybody else got anything else they want to say positively about the film before we move on to see if anybody's got anything negative to say about the film.
I like the music.
Finally, Kenzie's paid attention to the music.
But I don't know. I've pretty much said most of the things I want to say about it. I just really enjoyed it overall.
Well, that's also another one. Really, I found talking about the music. Do most films play the sort of lead track right at the start of the film?
Some films do.
See, because I've always thought that it's either at the end or somewhere in between that you might hear it. But it's right out at the box. The film comes in. Like, before you even see anything, the music's playing.
I think older films done it more than newer films now. I don't think you see it as much now. But yeah,
song's an absolute banger though.
I mean, it's a banger.
That's a good tune.
I've got some fun facts about the song. It wasn't originally meant to be performed by Simple Minds.
Didn't know that.
Do you want to take over and say who it should have been originally sung by?
Billy Idol.
Yeah, the song was written in mind for Billy Idol, who turned it down. Also,
why?
I'm not really sure. Also, Chrissie Hynde, the lead singer of the Pretenders, she turned it down, but then it was her that said, "Oh, you should give it to Simple Minds," because she was involved with Jim Kerr, who was the lead singer of Simple Minds at the time. I think they were either married or they were in a relationship with each other. So yeah, we wouldn't have had. I don't think Simple Minds would have had the worldwide explosion, or maybe the explosion in America that they would have had without that song. So I'm glad they did. Being a Scottish band and us being a Scottish podcast and from Scotland, I'm glad they did get the chance to do that big song. They were obviously big enough in the sort of indie scene at the time, but yeah, really good, cool song, absolute banger. And there's some other good bits of music in the film as well. This is the first podcast that Kenzie's brought up the music and went, "Oh, I like the music." Was there any reason why you just I like the music?
It jumped out to me.
Good.
Or mainly that one song did. I knew the song, so but yeah, no, I mean, I don't usually pick up on music unless it's like really noticeable, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So that's all the good stuff. There's some more good stuff, but unfortunately we have to get to some of the bad stuff. And when you discuss 80s John Hughes movies, you're not far away from something to speak about on this sort of topic. I don't know if anybody else sort of picked it up. If you're looking at the film through the eyes of a lens in 2022, there's some contentious sort of things that probably wouldn't be written in a script these days.
Yeah, there's a few bits, you know, some of the dialogue, some of the parts. It wasn't too much, but there was some parts you're like.
I'm only touching on it. Like I'm not, like I said in the Leon episode, like we talked about contentious sort of things related to that film. I'm not for one moment saying that this is a bad film and you shouldn't watch it, but a couple of things I would like to bring up is the use of gay slurs in the dialogue. Probably wouldn't be written in 2022, I don't think. You don't really hear words like that anymore. I think they were kind of cut out a long time ago. Also, the kind of sexual harassment kind of stuff.
Yeah, part of that was a little bit dodgy, yeah.
So
it was played for laughs as well, kind of, but like...
Yeah, like Molly Ringwald has revisited the film with her daughter. She wrote an article for somebody around about 2018 when the sort of Me Too movement was kicking off, and she'd said that she was a bit alarmed, or she wrote stuff about saying that watching these films with her daughter and sort of seeing these things isn't great, but did say that she still stands by the work and it was of the period. Something you always need to remember with these films is you need to remember when they were made, not the fact that it's 40 years down the line almost. You know, you've got to remember that films were made for a time period. People couldn't predict the future, and sadly we're just looking at that now, and we have to bring it up because we can't just be negligent with these things. We have to discuss it, and I don't agree with it now, but I still love this film, so I don't know what else to say really. What's your views on it?
Well, I agree with you. I don't watch it and go, oh my God, like you can't say that. I just watch it and purely enjoy it for what it is, which is one of my favourite films. So I don't really have anything bad.
Yeah, it's hard when it's one of your favourite films to kind of look at it that way. And yeah, like I've said, if you're watching it for pure enjoyment, you're probably going to let things slide a lot more. But yeah, it's just something that we had to touch on. Obviously, Kenzie, you were going to say something.
No, I wasn't. I mainly was going to say it. Yeah, I agree. But the thing with these films is of the time, isn't it? There's not much you can really do about it now. Should it stop you from watching the film? I don't think so. It's just you see it and you know that these things shouldn't be said, and you know now. But yeah, it did happen, and yeah, it should be frowned on a little bit, but it's still a good film, and that's who people back then were more like, I guess, which is alarming in certain ways. But yeah, yeah, I don't really have much else. Other criticisms, not really. I was fine for this film. There was one part I cringed at, but that was about it. So yeah, overall, I don't really have like any complaints really about it.
No, like I just wanted to sort of make sure I brought up two of the kind of bigger ones. John Hughes, if you look at John Hughes films, there is, unfortunately, just because of when he was writing and when he was in his sort of the prime of his career, things were a lot different. So you can look at it and you can sort of say things about a lot of his work. But yeah, this is a great film. I people still love it. We'll get to that in a bit when we speak about the sort of rules of the podcast. But yeah, it's an incredible film, and you should definitely go and check it out. So we're now at the part where we give our rating of the film out of 5 popcorn buckets. Now, as Kenzie has only watched it once, I assume, for the podcast, I'll hand it over to you, and you can let me see where you would give it as a, not place it, that comes at the end, but what you would give it sort of out of 5, because I'm always interested.
I enjoyed this film more than I thought I would, and yeah, I think it's really solid, and I have very little complaints. I've got pretty much no complaints about it. I think I really like it. I was kind of shocked. I would give it a 4. I think it's really good, and I think everyone should give it a watch. It's very enjoyable. There's just certain parts of the film like surprised me. I didn't think it would delve that deep into certain kind of subjects, and it did, and it was done really well, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would watch it again.
So I'm going to hand over to Lorna, and this is kind of funny because it's coming quite quick off the back of Jamie being in, my brother-in-law, Lorna's husband, and he essentially picked pretty much one of his favourite films of all time. Lorna's done the same. She's picked probably, I could probably only name maybe one other movie that you would have potentially above this in my knowledge of you. And I'm surprised it's not on the list. I've stole your Blu-ray copy of it. It's in my house. It's The Crow. And that's a phenomenal film as well, if nobody's seen that. But yeah, this is right up there with Lorna's sort of favourite film. So we're probably going to get another high score here.
I mean, I was thinking about it there, and I'm thinking you should never ever give something a complete 5, but I probably will. It's one of my favourite movies, and I'll go back and watch it over and over. And with Kenzie giving it such a high 4 for someone that's just watched it, yeah, a 5.
There you go. I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be a 5 out of 5. And to be honest with you, you say I'll give things 5, and I think there's going to be films on this list that will surprise people when it comes down to my ratings and how high they could potentially be. But yeah, so it's left to me. So yeah, I'm right on the lines of Kenzie. This is a solid 4 out of 5 for me. It's an incredibly enjoyable film to watch. It's great to see the character dynamics and the development, and yeah, it's just super enjoyable, and it's really such a good sort of feel good sort of coming of age teen movie. It's probably the quintessential teen movie. If you wanted to watch quote unquote teen movies, this is the number one place to start, because I think this kind of paved the way. And I think it's obviously rated as high as well in terms of where people put it, just not only in teen movies, but in actual like the pantheon of films is really high. And this is probably the best that there's ever been of this type of film. And it's still true to this day, and the film's nearly 40 years old. So yeah, incredible film. Go out and give a watch. Quintessential teen movie, quintessential 80s movie, great soundtrack, great acting. You've got some really cool up-and-comers that you'll see later on in the decade in a load of films. And yeah, it just hit everything perfectly at the right time. So that's us for the reviews section of the podcast. We will now move on to the rules of Cult Film Cafe, where we break the film down from a few different metrics to see whether we agree of it being a cult film. And yeah, that's basically where we are now. So just a quick rundown of the list. I do it on every episode just in case this is the first episode you listen to. We look at low budget / box office flop, rewatchability, quotability, brackets amongst fan bases, not well received by contemporary critics / reviewers, explores controversial topics, subjects and themes. And the last one, it got changed, but it's now cultural impact / legacy. Now, to kick it all off, we start with low budget / box office flop. Now, yeah, not a box office flop by any means, shape or form, but it is a low budget film.
Very low budget. Is that right? Is that 1 million?
$1 million to make the film. Yeah.
And the film made 51.5 million.
Yeah, 50x its
50
budget.
times its budget.
Yep. If only I could make one of those movies, I'd be alright. 50 times my budget, I'd be set for life.
Insane! You just wow.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize the budget would be that low.
I mean, it's still even incredibly low in today's money. I know that I do the conversion so that people kind of understand. So if you got a budget of about $1 million today, it's about just over 2.7 million, which is still incredibly low in terms of movie budgets.
That's amazing, and it made so much. My God.
I think it was just one of those films that people could relate to, and it reflected in the box office. I think it opened at number 3 in the US box office, which for this type of film, I doubt that they were expecting it to make as much money. But yeah, it's just it opened behind Beverly Hills Cop, which was the classic 80s film, and a film called Witness. So yeah, it's debut at number 3 in the US box office. Yeah, incredibly successful film, but low budget nonetheless. Lorna, do you have any, I know we're talking about budget, and this is maybe something that you're not super up to and familiar with, and what do you think made audiences want to go and see it? Do you have, if you were 16 in 1985, what's the demographics here? Is it sort of 16 to 25-year-olds? Is it?
Yeah, I think probably just being, I mean, when you do see the poster or the advertisement with the 5 of them together, and it does say who they all are, and that bit, it probably does make you want to see the film, and it gives you that kind of wee glimpse of who the characters are.
We talked about the song as well, strong song, and if that was kind of out and about and in the popular music charts at the time, it could have flocked people as well. Sometimes musics do sway a lot of people for things. Yeah, it's hard to just. It had that spark. It had that something that maybe it's going to be really difficult to explain. You get films like that all the time where you look at it and go, right place, right time. So yeah, that's it. That's a big tick there. We won't go on it any longer. We've spoken enough about it. And we move on to rewatchability, which is probably, if people don't know already, probably the major rule for, I think, all these films. It's probably the main one you really want to get a tick on this one, because I think this is probably the most heavily weighted of them, and in my opinion, because the more you watch a film, the more you kind of remember sort of things like quotes and stuff, and the more that you would maybe read up about it, and if you're rewatching it 40 years down the line, then the last rule totally makes sense of its legacy and cultural impact as well. So this sort of feeds out to it, and like we say in the podcast, the 90-minute film doesn't exist anymore.
I agree. That's a lot of the reasons why I don't watch so much films anymore. They're too long.
I like a long movie,
Or
I'm
going
not
to
gonna
this,
lie.
or go to the cinema. I can't sit for 2.5 hours, 3 hours in one go.
If they done a 40th anniversary screening of The Breakfast Club in a cinema, would you go and watch it?
Yes.
I think it's great. It's just a great length. It's not quite 90 minutes. It's 1 hour 37, but if you take away the start credits, end credits, it's probably about 90 minutes bang on. Most films have 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes worth of credits, so we'll still give it the sort of 90-minute mark. I think a lot of the films that we've spoke about so far on the podcast, apart from a couple, have been round about the sort of hour and a half, hour and 40-minute mark, and this has been one of the big talking points for us, and the guests have always agreed that, yeah, that's a big component as to why they're so familiar with the films that they're choosing, is because the length of the film makes it highly rewatchable for them. The thing about this is length seems to be one of the major things. There's so much about this movie that makes it, even as somebody that's familiar with it, I own a copy of it, I have done for many years. I have an extensive DVD collection, if you don't know that already. This is a film that I've owned for years. I've rewatched it countless times. It's one of my sister's favourite movie, if not favourite movie of all time. Really familiar with the film. And it never gets old. I could watch this film once a week for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think films like these are always like quite rewatchable. The length, and yeah, you've already mentioned the length, but like, yeah, I could probably rewatch this film multiple times, and I think you might get new stuff from it every time as well. It's just the type of film it is. It's just an enjoyable one. It does what it does. It's got a bit of meaning in it. I really like it, honestly. So yeah, I think most people would rewatch it.
What about you, Lorna?
Yeah, definitely.
And more to add in terms of rewatchability, why you revisit the film, or why you have done over your life, like the rewatchability of it, like, you know, because it's obviously a film that you have revisited on multiple occasions.
I think I just like the characters. I just like that idea that, you know, that it's not that straightforward, and that people can build relationships with outside their, like, just outside of where their people think they should.
Yeah, it's highly rewatchable. Give it a watch, like we're going to say all the time through this film now. So we'll quickly move on to Quotability, which is sometimes a contentious point in the podcast. If you're familiar with past episodes, there's sometimes been heavily debates within it. But yeah, I think this is a film that's got some real good one-liners in it.
Nothing's super jumping out to me at the moment about the Quotability. I think I need to give it another watch. I think that's another one for me that I've got to give it another. The one that I remembered getting said was "Eat My Shorts." That one stood out to me because I was like, "All right, okay."
Is that where the Simpsons stole it from?
Maybe.
We're going to maybe part of the legacy of the film that we'll touch on later. I Eat My Shorts. Bender's got a lot of good lines, but I think there's a lot of good character dialogue. It's hard to kind of get quips. It's Bender's got some stuff. Does Barry Manilow know you raided his wardrobe?
Oh yeah.
Bender's great, and it's like Vernon's good. Rich Vernon, the character. Don't mess with the bill, young man. You'll get the horns, and he does the rock symbol. It's like, I've got you for 2 months.
I really feel like Bender kind of carries the film in like the kind of first part of the film, when everyone else is kind of silent.
It's because it's his domain, because he's there all the time.
Yeah.
The characters are quiet in the beginning, maybe apart from one, is they're quite uncomfortable and they don't want to be there, whereas I think Bender, as much as he probably would protest, I think he likes being in detention every week, and it gives him some satisfaction. Whether it's the relationship he's got with the teacher just to annoy him, or whether it's just to get away from his home life.
Yeah, I feel like that's got a lot to do with it. I think that's probably good. He does seem like he's completely kind of content with being there.
Yeah, like that's his place.
Yep. Yeah, I think someone even refers to it as his home at one point.
Yeah, it does, yeah. It's like later on in the film, because there's a part earlier on where I'm sure Andrew says something about people don't even know he's there. Like, if he just disappeared, nobody would even know. And later on in the film, like, he admits that he's like, I could disappear forever and it wouldn't make any difference. It's the one thing that he says, and I think he knows that himself. I think that's why he goes out his way to be a nuisance, to make people know that he's there, because I think he kind of understands deep down that if he didn't do that, we wouldn't get any of the attention that he's getting.
Well, it sounds from the relationship with his parents that is the only type of affection or attention is negative, which you find. So he's just counteract that. Like, he knows that he's going to get a rise out of his dad if he acts like a certain way.
This film, like, really does hit home in that, and that kind of discovery with yourself, and just how, even though it might not look like you've got things in common, just how quickly you can find common ground with people if you take a bit of time. I mean, they've got eight or nine, I think it's 9 hours together in terms of actual, not like their time, not our time on screen, obviously, but yeah, that's definitely one of my big ones that hits home to me is the athlete, so Andrew, and it's like, I think this is really quite alarming and true, though. It's like we're all pretty bizarre. Some of us are just better at hiding it, that's all. And it's like, I think everybody feels like they're not normal, but try and be normal.
Can't believe you. You're so weird. You don't say anything all day, and then when you open your mouth, you unload all these tremendous lies all over me.
You're just pissed off because she got you to admit something you didn't want to admit to.
Okay, fine, but that doesn't make it any less bizarre.
What's bizarre? I mean, we're all pretty bizarre. Some of us are just better at hiding it, that's all.
How are you bizarre?
He can't think for himself.
She's right.
Yeah, or is it one of those, I can't remember. I can remember the first time watching it, but I can't remember how I felt about it. It's just that I really did enjoy it. And going through high school was tough. I watched it when I was in high school. I think, did everyone that was watching it think, oh, I really relate to this, but then didn't speak out because they thought, oh, well, if I say something, then I'm going to get some sort of backlash. Of admitting that you feel that way.
Even if you've got good friends, I think even at that age, it's hard to be the real you. Even if you've got super close friends at high school, and even if you maybe later on in life you do develop closer friendships, and obviously as you become an adult you're opening up and you become more mature and able to sort of talk about things, but at the time it's it's really, it is something that does hit home in this film, that they all, even though they all come from different walks of life and they're all doing different things and performing at different levels at high school, their lives are pretty sad and frail and very vulnerable. And yes, some of them's built on money and reputation, some of them's built on academia, and some of it's built on athleticness. Like even Brian, he's the nerd. He obviously, amongst his peers, gets plaudits because he is super clever. Whereas if he wasn't that academic, would he just fall into the sort of the ether of just being a normal person at high school? Like, because even though he's went out his way to be super clever and he gets picked on for it, it's probably the only thing that he thinks he can do to make himself stand out, because he maybe doesn't have the athleticism and the genetics to be a wrestler or a football player or something like that.
Well, that was one of the reasons when he said about taking his own life. It was because he was going to fail at a subject and he couldn't fail because it was the only thing he had was being the best at everything. And that his line, like academic,
becomes quite a slippery slope though. If you base yourself on a standard of academia that can be quite hard to maintain. Quotes in it, I think the best one for me is the end of the film where they're leaving and Brian's speaking. So because at the start of the film they were told they needed to write a minimum 1,000 word essay about why they're there, or like something like that. But doing research for the film, the end essay that he reads out is 96 words.
But they couldn't actually do a 1,000 thing, could they?
Well, they had 9 hours, man, to write 1,000 words. Yeah. The Brian Johnson, that's his name. It's like, "Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong.
But we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. And you see us as you want to see us. In the simplest terms, the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain and an athlete
And a basket case. A princess.
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
Because that's the only way the name gets the film, because he writes it at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's never mentioned, yeah.
He's my favourite character, I think.
Who?
Brian.
Really?
I think I like Brian. I know a lot of people are going to be like, I like Bender. Bender's my favourite.
I like them all, but no, I do like Brian. I think there's just something nice and sweet, kind of naive about him that the other two male characters don't have.
But yeah, that's quotability, and like you've said, we've named a few quotes, and yeah, it is quotable, and some of the quotes and the lines of dialogue do hit home, and they make you reflect about life experiences and stuff like that, and things that we've touched on in the start of the podcast as well. So now we'll move on to not well received by contemporary critics / reviewers. Problem I have with this one is this was well received.
Yeah.
Basically, there was two big names in the sort of film critique in America at the time: Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4. Gene Siskel gave it 3.5 out of 4. I don't know why the 80s film critics were reviewing films out of 4 instead of 5 though. When did 5 stars become the new metric?
I don't know.
They do it. Janet Maslin was another one. She wrote for the New York Times. She wrote a less positive review. She spoke about them good young actors in the Breakfast Club, though a couple of them have been given unplayable roles. Basically, Ali Sheedy and Judd Nelson. The 5 young stars would have mixed well, even without the fraudulent encounter group canter towards which the Breakfast Club forces them. Yeah. She did say that the actors were good. I think Alison, for a lot of the film, is a bit of a not really in the film, but over time she does obviously come into the film. But yeah, no, it is definitely a film that was reviewed highly at the time by some of the biggest critics out there, and it's a film that still stands up today as we look at things like the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah, it's a very high. Was it 89% on Rotten Tomatoes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the film, like that review you read is the only one I've heard that's slightly less positive.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, it's like even now still getting high reviews.
Yeah, I think to have 89% even retroactively, people looking back at it are still giving it high reviews. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 92%, so they're almost in line with each other, which is really quite good.
Yeah.
It probably deserves it, to be fair. I think even at the time when you look at Roger Ebert's review and Gene Siskel's review, I think it was fair then and still stands up today. It's one of them. Like we spoke about, obviously, earlier, there is some bits in the sort of narrative and that you would be like, it's maybe not PC in 2022, but in 1985 the world is a different place. Are you surprised to see that it's so well reviewed and revered and well loved by people that critique films? Especially, Roger Ebert, in my opinion, is probably the biggest name in terms of film reviewing of all time.
No, I wouldn't say I'm surprised. It's not something I really think about when I'm watching films, is what other people think of them.
I suppose that's fair. You
I
watch
look at
films
things for a different reason.
Aye, you watch films for a different reason. But no, this one could really be
I don't think there's
short
much to
and
say.
sweet.
Yeah.
There's not really much to say. So sometimes we try and sort of argue back about negative reviews, especially if it's films that we like. But unfortunately, we all love this film, and the audience loves it, and critiques love it. So there isn't really much to say. So there you have it. There's another one off the list. So this is where we get to the explores controversial topics, subjects, and themes. Quote unquote controversial, because it could be the sticky word here. This, though, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a controversial topic, but I would say that the main theme or topic of this movie is the way that it looks at stereotypes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell Kenzie's done zero research for this podcast.
I mean, I mean, I don't really think it's that controversial, but I think as the film goes on, some of the subject matter does get kind of gets a bit controversial. But it's
this is what I'm saying, the controversial quote unquote. But let's talk about things that it kind of explores, the stereotypes within it, and how. Yeah, I suppose the controversial ones is the tricky part, but it does explore some good things here. Like stereotypes is the big one for me, and the way that it explores each individual person and the sort of stereotypes of that character, and the way that eventually they break it down and sort of they're trying to break the barrier down. You know, they're trying to break the wall down, and maybe this film did do well for high school students after seeing it. Like, they maybe go, oh, that jock's maybe the athlete that I think's a dick because of the way he looks and acts. Like, maybe he isn't like that if you get to know him. And I feel like this film kind of done that in a weird way where it does normalise people.
Yeah, pretty much. It humanizes people in a way.
Yeah.
It makes you like realise, like I had a word. I think I had a word for it now. I just forgot. But like, yeah, it's just it breaks you to show you how people are. They're not all just like that one thing. There's a lot more to each individual person. And yeah, does it really well. Yeah. I just, even though like it's got somewhat controversial kind of parts, it's not really that controversial. Of course, some of the dialogue and some parts of it now are going to be seen much more controversial than it did back then. Bar that, there's not. I find it hard because there's like some parts like is his name Brian? Is it Brian? Yeah.
Brian's the academic one.
Yeah, like he like him like hinting that he was going to kill himself. That's quite controversial. But the way they kind of do it doesn't make it seem that controversial. It's about the film kind of keeps it kind of light-hearted through like the whole film, in a way. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think looking back on it retroactively, I mean, sometimes when we're on the podcast, I'll do a quick bit of searching live so that we can kind of talk about something. So the I suppose the most contentious thing they're bringing up in terms of the controversial aspects of the film is the romantic relationship between Bender and Claire. That's probably the big ticket here in terms of controversialness.
It's a bit weird.
Because of the way that he basically abuses her, verbally abuses her, sexually harasses her in parts of the film, and basically, even though he does all of that, by the end of the film, he's maybe this really good guy, and they end up. We don't know if they end up with each other. They kiss each other, and it looks like this is the type of film that should have had a Monday morning sequel where they all go into school. Would they become a pack themselves?
Yeah.
And then alienate everybody else, which would basically be defeatist to what this film was trying to achieve, because that could potentially have happened, where they're so familiar with each other. Or would they have went back into their normal lives and not spoke to each other? Or could they have balanced it in a way which made this film make sense and for the narrative to actually hold up?
I must admit, when I did watch it again, I did wonder at the end, I'm like, oh, if in real life go back on when they're saying goodbye and you see each other Monday morning, it's not like a holiday romance where they're at different schools. Would you just be able to say, that's us, we're just back to our normal life now?
It's really weird. I don't even know. Like, I feel like it really could happen, but it's like, Huh. It's odd.
It is odd, obviously. These are films that have got set times, lengths, and stuff, and it would just be quite interesting to see the characters in their normal high school sort of environment and how they would react to each other. I think we do really need to talk about like the stereotypes thing is a good thing about this film. I think that's a good topic or subject to talk about in terms of film narrative and exploring it in the way that they do it well. We really should touch about the whole sexual harassment, weird verbal abuse shit with Bender and Claire a wee bit more, and because I know that Molly Ringwald, the actress who played Claire, kind of came out. She wrote an article a few years ago, 2018, I think, where she references other, like, this is the thing, we were talking about John Hughes earlier. She references other controversies in his body of work. It's basically in his filmography. He's got things that, obviously he was writing at a time where things were okay to talk about, would do what he was doing, or they weren't sort of frowned upon. I just think there's some things that she's mentioned that probably wouldn't be in the film if it was made today, which then begs the question of, could you make a film like that today? Because me and Kenzie spoke about it in the last episode, and categorically, Leon, which was the last episode, if you haven't listened to it, check it out now on Spotify, just search Cult Film Cafe, you'll get the episode. Me and Kenzie sort of spoke about that at length a wee bit, and we both agree that a film like Leon will never ever be made again.
Yeah.
Ever. And purely due to the subject matter and stuff that's in it. Is Breakfast Club kind of like that? Because I feel as though if you start deleting some of the stuff out of it, you'd start to lose a lot of the film.
I think a film like The Breakfast Club can still come out today. I don't think it will, and it will be slightly different, of course. I feel like certain parts will be kind of changed to kind of fit into what things are like now today. But I just think, see, teen films that come out now, they're usually bad. I think teen films have been burned out. Like they like films like Breakfast Club, and that came out, and like people got really into them, and over like the next like 20 years, tons of them came out, and it got to the point where everyone was fed up with them, and then I think they started putting, I think everyone who was making them was putting less effort into them, and you just now end up with a lot of teen films that are just not that good. So
I disagree. I think you get some good teen films, but like I say, they're probably they're few and far between, obviously. But there is still some good ones out there. But we're not here to talk about teen movies. There's other podcasts that do that. But yeah, no, I know that Molly Ringwald wrote an article, and I just want to touch it. It's probably in the sort of wake of the Me Too movement and stuff like that, and everything moving to a more politically correct stance, and everybody should be more liberal and stuff like that, and that's fine, and I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And she sort of defended the film as well as sort of she also sort of spoke about some of the things in it that was a bit troubling, so to speak. You know, like we talked about the Bender putting his face up her skirt, and that's probably something that a lot of people, depending on where you sit on the fence, would maybe feel like it shouldn't be there. But people will maybe just watch the film for pure enjoyment and laugh at it, and that's maybe why it was there. But still, nonetheless, it probably wouldn't be in a film now. The drug use of teenagers, so they kind of idolise drug use. Like, idealise is the word I was looking for. Drug use, you know, because it felt as though that's how they managed to bond as a group when they were getting high on marijuana.
I want to know what Andrew took.
Marijuana.
That's what marijuana done to him. Man was
going.
Well,
I think
he was flying about, and he screamed so loud that he managed to smash a window.
I think. Well, that's the thing. I think drugs affect everybody differently.
I don't know about marijuana doing that.
Mate, you don't know. You've never took it. You might turn into a super athlete for 10 minutes if you smoke a joint. You never know.
Really wouldn't think so. but who knows?
Or a couch potato.
And that's more like it. That's probably what would happen.
Like Andrew, that was Andrew Bryan's character with the shades. It's like he's moving really slow. It does kind of idealise drug use, and that's probably wouldn't necessarily be in a film as well. Drug use is in films today. I'm not saying they take drug use out, but linking it to teenage use, because I think there's probably quite a big problem with that in society in general, and you probably don't want to then put a movie out that's for that target demographic that basically says it's okay to do that. That's all I'm saying. I just think there's a couple of things in this film that are a bit contentious, maybe not controversial, but contentious in today's market and in today's society. I'm trying to be the political guy here. You two are just like, nah, it's 1985, it's for laughs, it's funny. I'm like, right, cool, it's your standpoint, but I have to just make sure that people don't think that the podcast is going to be like, oh, we don't care about these subjects, and we do, we really do. That's why we discuss them.
No, I do get that. Like, I do get what you're saying.
It's just that when you go back, you're going to see a lot of things like that, like these things. There's not much you can do. Yeah, like, I think it's good to bring them up, but it's like we all know certain things about like the film are like shouldn't fly, but it's different. Like, I mean, it's a different time. There's not much you can do about it, I guess. Really, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, but I mean, like growing up, you were a young girl in an age where things were much different, and you probably, guys like that did exist, and they probably acted that way because they could get away with it or ride their looks, and that just isn't acceptable. I think there is pros and cons on it. You know, the film stands up. It's a great sort of look into teen life in the 80s and sort of even today. But I really hope that people learn the lessons that are in the film as well. And if they're in there and people are looking at them as lessons, that's great. But I really don't want guys like that to watch The Breakfast Club when they're, 13 and think that John Bender's the way to be with kids at school, because that's really another can of worms that you could open. And you can't say that people don't idolise people on screen, because they do.
I think with these things, like people like look at like kind of idolising things they shouldn't. I don't really think it's the film's faults for doing this. I think it's more of the person and maybe how they were. I don't know, because most people watch certain things and go like, yeah, that is wrong, and most people will know. But there's some people who will see it differently, and I don't think that's entirely the film's any film that you're watching's fault, really. Because
I agree, it's the same with the video game. Like, I agree that it's the person, not the product, that's the problem. But sometimes it's a bit weird to see that if you look at, say, one film and there's loads of the same thing happening, sometimes you maybe have to look at the link. I'm not saying that you shouldn't watch this film. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch this film for pure enjoyment. I just wanted to make sure that we touched upon things on the podcast that could potentially be seen in a negative light, especially when we're talking about controversial sort of things about the film. And unfortunately, there is a few in this that people have sort of brought up, and one of the main cast members is brought up in a reflective article that she wrote a few years ago. I mean, if she's going to bring it up, then it's only right that people that us bring it up. But yes, I still love this film. I still think you should watch it. But yeah, you've always got one caveat I'll give to you is one bit of advice: always put yourself in the mind of somebody from that period of time, not right now, because then it could be a bit dicey. But anyway, let's move on. Let's not get bogged down in the negativity. Let's move on to the cultural impact and legacy of the film.
It's got a huge legacy. It started a whole genre of films.
Started a whole genre of sort of coming of age, sort of teen movies. There was a few round about the time, sort of coming of age, teen. This is more specifically teen movie, I would say. That, yeah, it's a quintessential teen movie. It started a whole sort of run of these. I mean, they've never stopped. I mean, there's teen movies getting made out. Like, what was the one Netflix Lords of Metal. Is that what they called that? That's a teen. Was that their kids? But
Oh, I've not watched it yet, but Lords of Metal.
Lords of Metal on Netflix. I've watched it.
It's supposed to be really funny.
It's quite funny.
I've never even heard of it.
It's just these like young high school kids that are into metal. It's weird. It's basically their kind of riff on a teen movie. But the one thing that's happened in recent years is the age range has got younger. I think for these movies is like, what was the one with the wee boys that were in it?
We're all getting older.
No, but it was like the wee. It was like the young. It was the one. It was like they maybe just got to high school, but the name escapes me. If anybody knows, hit up the podcast and let us know. Is it like the Good Boys or something? I don't know. It was something, and they were like really, really young. I think that's what's happened. But no, even over the years, you've had some really good teen movies to come out of the genre, and the legacy and the sort of impact it's had culturally. I think it's hard to just equate how big an impact films have had. Some are maybe sort of easier than others to sort of speak about, but this is such an iconic film. Like most of these films, Kenzie was familiar with the film before even watching it.
Yeah.
And the plus point about this film compared to some of the other ones is this film can't really be ruined because there's not like a cliffhanger or a big plot twist. Yeah. So that's a good thing about this, even though it's maybe big in meme culture or, GIFs and whatever you would call it. You're younger, you know all that stuff, and it's probably big in that scene, isn't it? Probably this film.
I've not heard. Maybe GIFs, but not the bar GIFs that I've not seen a single meme about. No meme, not a single meme about Breakfast Club.
Never. That's weird.
It's not really a memey film. Yeah. I think you gotta understand now, especially now, like the 2020s, memes have got really stupid. Really stupid.
I think the thing about memes now is they're just daft instead of people being clever. Because memes back in the day were people that were really smart about the picture and what they were saying, and you would put the link in. It's like, that's super clever and funny. Whereas memes now are just stupid. Like
memes now are Saul Goodman in 3D, which just makes no sense. But it's hilarious. It is hilarious. I'm one of those people who like Zoomer humor because I'm dumb. But like, yeah, it probably don't. I think it probably has a lot of gifs and stuff like that, and I think a lot of like. I think that's like. I think I've seen like I've seen like Ryan like have like the walrus thing. I've seen that as a gif and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some of the dance moves and stuff like that. I've even seen like the part when they're doing all the dance moves. I've seen that. Like, is that the first film to do that?
I don't know, actually.
So I've seen that like that kind of part in like so many other films. In fact, that the dance move when they're like shimmying to the left with their like feet, like they move it like what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
I've seen that exact move and pretty much filmed the exact same in Ted 2. I wonder if that's like referencing that or not. I don't know how often it's done, but I think it's been done in quite a few films. I don't know if this one was the first to do it. It's the film's really important. I think because it just started so much and one good thing is, although it did start like a huge genre, it's never been forgotten. It's still seen as it's still seen as the kind of teen film. I think it should be. I don't really like much teen films. I think this is a much higher standard to most.
Yeah, it's such a snapshot of the time period as well, just in terms of style. And you just look at costume. So another bit. So John Bender's character. His costume was made. I love the way he dresses in the film. I think the way he looks is great, like what he's wearing. But his costume is made up largely of things he went in for his audition wearing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But for Claire was meant to be wearing something else, but it didn't look as sort of posh. So they went to Ralph Lauren, the only Ralph Lauren store in Chicago, and bought an outfit. That's what she's wearing. So that's probably a few $1,000s of clothes just in her character, just so she looked sort of the way she did.
How rich is her family meant to be? It is maybe quite rich, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's another thing. The BMW that our dad's driving at the start of the movie is actually John Hughes' car, the director.
Yeah?
It's his car. Brian's mother and sister in the car, that's his real mum and sister in real life. It's got all these weird things that when you start reading about this film, it's incredible. In terms of like legacy, I mean, it's been called the quintessential 80s film. It really does capture the culture of the time. Empire in 2008, which is a magazine I love and I stand by it. It's a great piece of film writing and sort of what they do there. They ranked it at number 369 in their 500 greatest movies of all time, not just teen movies, movies of all time, which is a great list to be on. It later ranked at 38 on their list in 2014, so the newer list that got bumped up by 330 places, because you're obviously different stages of time, you're retroactively looking back at different time periods. The New York Times placed the film on its best 1,000 movies list ever. Entertainment Weekly ranked the film number 1 on its list of 50 best high school movies. So it's a teen movie, it's a high school movie, it's like all these... Has anybody ever seen the parody, Not Another Teen Movie? You will have, but you won't be super familiar with it. It's kind of parodies all these teen movies.
Yeah, I have seen it, but that's a while.
Aye, so Paul Gleason, who plays Principal Vernon, he basically parodies himself from Breakfast Club and Not Another Teen Movie, which I feel is quite cool. Oh, the film's got loads of awards, like loads and loads of awards. So it is such a good film. Like, it is so influential as well. Based on the discussion that we've just had, we will decide whether it is a cult film, and then, if we decide it is, where we would put it in our top 100 list. Not the podcast top 100 list, our own personal list. So yeah, I'll kick things, well, we won't kick things off because I've been speaking too long. So one of you pick it up and let me know your feelings of the film and if you think it's a cult film or not.
I'll go first then. I thought about it. I think when this film seems like it's still really popular now. I think when this film came out, it was like, it doesn't seem like it would become like a kind of cult film just because it was really popular. But that doesn't always mean that it wouldn't become a cult film, and I think it definitely is a cult film. The film still has a huge craze about it now. So yeah, or a following anyway. Not everyone really cares about it, but there's tons of people that do. It's got it's got quite a big following, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I see it as a cult. I would see it as a cult film. I think it's a bit different from the other cult films I've looked at, but it definitely is. The teen movie, and it's got a huge... people still love it and still watch it. You still hear a lot about it at times. I think this film's a cult film. I think even as time goes further on, people will still know this film.
Oh, there you go. Kenzie thinks it's a cult film and deserves a place on the list of cult movies. Now, Lorna, what about yourself? Would you think this film is a cult film?
Yeah, I agree that it is a cult film.
Any reasons why do you think it still remains the following it has today? Like, what in your mind sort of would you say that makes it sort of that so relatable, I suppose, even today?
I don't know why it's still so popular.
You agree that it's a cult film?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I agree. I'll agree with both of you on that sentiment. It's arguably one of the most iconic films of the 80s, in my opinion. It's if you were to write down sort of 15 films that you would recommend people that wanted a slice of the 80s to sort of watch, this would definitely be on it for me, because it's a different sort of genre of film. My 15, if I ever done that, the 15 would be such a wide variety of movies though. But yeah, for me, it's a massive cult film. Like, still got a huge cult following nearly 40 years on, and it is the quintessential teen movie, high school movie, however you categorise it. It's probably the best one. It might be a struggle for anything to top it. I think it was just the right place, right time. So I agree, based on the discussion that we've had, that it's definitely a cult film. It could be a cult classic. Well, I won't go that far, but it's definitely a cult film. So yeah, we all agree it's a cult film. So next up is we then place it on our top 100 list. So I will hand it over to Lorna because she'll be short and sweet, and then we'll wrap up the podcast afterwards.
Say for me, I mean, like I've said, it is one of my favourite films. It's really good, and I will continue to watch it over and over. And I would put it in probably my top 5.
In terms of cult films?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Do you have anything else that you could think off the top of your head that you would maybe put in your top 5? Doesn't have to be films on this list. It could just be films that you might go, right, it might fit the cult sort of moniker or the cult
There
status.
probably
but
is. I
maybe
probably
honest.
just have to have a think about it. But I don't think I could give it a definite, really, this is definitely my number one. 'Cause I think there is other things that are just about at the same level.
Yeah, fair. Right, it's top 5. So Lorna's placed the film in her top 5. I'm going to go next. I don't put this film in specific numbers. That's a Kenzie thing, or at least he does most of them. I would say that for me, I would place this in. I think my top 20 probably needs a film like this, so I'll probably put it in my top 20. It could fall out the top 20 though, the further down the sort of the rabbit hole we go in terms of cult films. But for right now, I'll place it firmly in my top 20. It is definitely a quintessential sort of iconic 80s film and has a huge sort of cult following still today. So yeah, I think it deserves its place in the top 20. What about you, Kenzie?
I've been thinking about this one. I'm not too sure. I think I would probably. I was thinking 20s, and I'm like, maybe I'd probably put it a little bit up. So I'm gonna put it in the late 20s. I'm gonna put it about 28, 29, probably about 29 at the moment. I think it could go. I think it could go higher, but at the moment that's where I feel it should be. I kind of agree with you the fact that I think low down there should be a film like this, and if there's any film like this, it should be this one really. So yeah, I'm gonna put it there, but I think I could probably move that one higher. I'll just wait and see with that, and see what other films we've got coming, and where I'll put them. So yeah, at the moment I think I'll sit just under 30.
So there you have it. It's inside my top 20, inside Kenzie's top 30, and inside Lorna's top 5. So The Breakfast Club, yes, we agree, it is a cult film, and we all loved it. We all gave it at least a 4 out of 5 on the podcast as well. So go out and watch it. It costs you absolutely nothing. It's free to watch on Amazon Prime right now. So that is us for this episode of the podcast. It's been a pleasure as always, and if you would like to get in contact with us here at Cult Film Cafe, you can find us on Instagram at Cult Film Cafe, funnily enough, and you can also email the podcast at thecultfilmpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, if you would like to get in contact with me personally, you can find me on Instagram at 081331 Productions. It's the best place to get me. It's the kind of only social media platform that I use. And if you would like to get in contact with Kenzie, you can get him on Instagram at
Doge_dogs on Instagram.
And if you're a bit of a gamer and you like to check out Twitch streams, you can find Kenzie streaming his heart out, trying to get that Dublin Fall Guys every now and again. Kenzie, tell them where they can find you.
Twitch.tv/CrotaStickman.
Yeah, give him support out there to try and get that crown in Fall Guys. You know, he needs that help to get a solo crown.
Hey, I got one recently. I got one.
I don't know why Fall Guys has came back with such a bang. Anyway, and also, you might see me or not see me, you might hear me in some of Kenzie's streams along the way where we sort of play some video games with each other. And as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to discuss the film. And yeah, check out past episodes of the podcast and we'll be with you again in the future and hopefully for a long period of time. And it's been an absolute blast. So it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Bye.
Podcast out, everybody.
There we go.